Okay, in this video, we're going to go over doing employees, what you have to do to add one, the requirements for their passwords, how to set up their permissions, all of that good stuff. So we're just going to go over here to our sample database here. And in this particular database right now, we only have one employee who is the administrator, the 01 account. If we go in, we can go to System Administration here, and then Employees. This is our Employee Maintenance section. You can see on the left a list of all of your employees. In this case, we only have the 01 employee who is an administrator, as mentioned. So if we add a new employee, you can have a cashier ID of up to 4 characters. In this case, we'll just do my initials. This is one of the few required fields. The only other required field is actually a password that you have to confirm. And then everything else is optional. It's just if you want to record this information for your record keeping purposes, so that you can easily access everybody's address and email address. That can be useful. The first and last name are used in some reports. Like if you do an hours and wages report, if you have their first and last name set, it will show you who they are. Which can also be very useful for payroll purposes to make it easier to track, particularly if you're doing the hours and wages feature in the software. So if you're doing that or the scheduling features, we would pretty highly recommend setting at least their first and last name, but you do not have to. So we're going to set this employee up with a password here. And when you create them, the password needs to be at least 7 characters with at least 1 number and 1 letter. It will be case sensitive, but you don't have to use uppercase. They can change this password later themselves through the change password function, but as an administrator, you can always come back in here to reset an employee. So the most important part of adding an employee is their permissions. And this is the section below here. So there are a number of pre-filled in template sets of permissions that using this will just automatically check many boxes based on the most common set of settings for that. But we're going to go through each of these and what it does in order to make it a little clearer. So the most important one is administrator right here. The administrator, if you check this, none of the other permissions matter because they can do them. They will be able to have permission for everything. And the reason for that is administrator gives them access to this screen. So they could always go in and just change their permissions. So they just have permission to do everything if they are an administrator. That includes adding employees and other functions that are administrator only, such as restoring a database if you are using a local server. So make sure you only check that for people who should have it, but you do need to have at least one user who has it, or you can't manage your employees. In the event you uncheck all of the administrators so that you don't have any, then the 01 cashier will be given the administrator again. If you've lost your password for all of your administrators, you'll need to contact support for help with resetting a password. Own Customer Scheduler indicates that if you're using the Customer Scheduler feature and you're using it based on your employees, that this particular employee will show up as somebody who can have appointments scheduled. This is particularly useful for like salons, so that customers can be assigned to particular beauticians. Active. If your employee is not active, they will not be able to log in. They will not be able to clock in. They won't even show up on the time clock. So if somebody were no longer an employee of yours, you could uncheck active, and that would make it more secure that they are no longer allowed to do things. So individual permissions under here, those aren't, the customer scheduler and active aren't really permissions so much as settings on the employee, and administrator kind of overrides the rest. But other than that, they are pretty self-explanatory by and large. Under store management, these are things that affect the setup of the store or that that are done as kind of back office functions. They're not things that people would typically need in order to just do a day-to-day cashier thing. Store settings indicates whether or not they can go into system administration and then settings to make changes to various settings in the system. This can range from things like what receipt printer you're using to your tax rates. Departments and categories is whether or not they can edit and add new departments and categories through the store menu. Vendors is the same, just for vendors rather than departments or categories. Physical inventory is whether the employee can initiate a full physical inventory. That's a process by which you can scan items in and do a mass adjustment on your stock levels. So you shouldn't give that to anybody where you would not trust them to be able to update stock levels. It will make a record that that's something that's happened, but it can be quite disruptive. So you want to make sure the people who have that permission are both trustworthy and able to do that without incident. Purchase orders is access to the purchase order system, the full purchase order system. Instant purchase orders gives you access to the instant PO system, and vendor returns gives you access to vendor returns. All three of those are back office functions. In a lot of stores, only managers are allowed to do those, or very specific people are allowed to do those. And so without that permission, you just cannot get into those respective sections at all. Reports. All reports means you can run every report in the system. Specific reports means you can run whatever reports if you hit manage that are checked on this screen. I'm not going to go over every report here. Each of these correlates to one report. By default, you can see that none of them are checked. So by default, you cannot run any reports. And it's not even just that you can't run them. The option to run them won't even appear on the report screen. We're going to leave this blank. We're actually going to leave this employee with very few permissions to show what it's like if you don't have permission to do things. Sale transactions affects at the register options. Change prices indicates whether you're allowed to actually directly set a price. If that's on, then price change limit will limit the monetary amount. So you can limit it to, like, they can change prices by $5, but not more than that, for example. But if you can't change prices at all, then price change limit has no effect. Delete items is whether they're allowed to delete individual line items off of a receipt. And then open cash drawer is just whether or not they can use the open cash drawer button. The cash drawer will still open if they complete a transaction, and it needs to. But if they do not have that permission, they cannot just go open cash drawer through the register functions menu. Items items indicates permissions that affect item maintenance. Without view, you can't actually look at items at all. Add is whether you can add a new item that hasn't been in inventory before. Update is whether you can make changes to most fields on an item. Separate from that, if you have update, you still need permission for changing the costs, which is new cost and used cost, or changing quantities, which is new quantity and used quantity. Without those permissions, you can do updates to fields like title or category, but you can't change the cost or the quantity. That is the cost to the store. The update permission is sufficient to change the selling price. Under customers here, you add and edit is similar to the add and update permission for items. Transactions allows you to do customer-based transactions, such as they make a payment to you towards their account, or you make an adjustment to their transaction balance. Adjust rewards points allows you to directly adjust what their rewards points balance is towards earning whatever reward you have set in your system. And then finally, under miscellaneous, there's a few features that don't really fit under anything else. Adjust gift card balance allows you to change the balance of a Extreme POS store gift card. This doesn't allow you to change if you're using a Mercury Payment Systems gift card or another integrated payment systems gift card, as those can't be adjusted through the system at all. You have to adjust them through whatever integrated processor you're using. Print barcodes allows you to use the label printer. Most employees usually need that, but sometimes people do want to limit that to specific people, as labels can be a little pricey. And then void past invoices allows you to cancel an invoice after it's been completed. Now, there are some caveats on this. There are certain ones that cannot be done. You can only ever void invoices the day they were done. The system will not allow you to void one from a previous day. And then based on a few other things, certain invoices may not be able to void. But this is a permission that you really want to make sure that you trust the people you give it to, as it can be used for malfeasance if put in the hands of the untrustworthy. So we're going to go ahead and save this employee just to kind of show what it's like, because we're logged in as somebody with administrator, which means we have all of the different options and everything. If we log out and then change the employee ID to that user, and we try to go in to store, for example, you'll see that we don't have the items menu because we don't have view items. We don't have departments and categories because we can't manage those. Same with vendors. We can still see the customers because there is not a separate, there's no view permission for customers. People have to be able to see who the customers are, but you can't edit them. You can only view them. If we go under system administration, we'll see that the only thing we can see here is the license for the software and then the ability to change our own password. If we go under activities, we'll see that like physical inventory is not there. So most permissions are handled simply by not making the option to do what you don't have permission to do available. But if we were to go into the register, for example, and then just as to give an example, just add a few items here on the invoice and then try and delete one, then it's going to tell us that we don't have permission to delete items. We need to contact a manager for assistance. So in the event we've set them to not be able to do that, and they added something incorrectly, they'll have to call over a manager who can log in here by hitting the change employee button there and putting in their credentials, and then they can delete the item. And then the other employee can log back in to do what they need to do. So that's the main thrust of employee permissions. One other note is that even if you're not going to use these to limit people, it can be very useful to set them up for the purposes of using the labor scheduler or time clock. See the manual for more information about those features. If you have any questions, you can contact us at support@extremepos.com. You can leave a comment on this video. You can give us a call. You can visit our website at ThunderPOS.com. Thank you for watching, and you all have a good day.